Wow, that was so beautiful. Thank you so much for your music. And it was like you were, you know, in the notes, memos of everything that's been presented today. So
Even
that's
channeling
amazing.
the pre-talk discussion too on that first song. So
For real.
thank you.
So thank you for inviting us to come. My name is Reaieh.
And I'm Erik Stoneburner.
And let's see, we had a really wonderful beginning conversation, so I'm going to attempt to reel it back as if that didn't happen and start again. So the Hopi Reservation is located in the northeastern corner of Arizona, very close to the Four Corners. And they are a very private people. Usually cameras and video is not allowed to be taken there on the mesas. Granted, that is changing with the advent of smartphones and the young people and the fact that they're handing out free smartphones there right now. But thousands of years before, I'm going to just start with this, before the Catholic Church continued their excursions and excavation of nationalities and
Happy Cinco de Mayo too to everybody, by the way. This kind of ties all in.
True. We were looking at that yesterday, like, why is it Cinco de Mayo when we're having this conversation? But it is so appropriate because we are looking at, just like in that last song, here we are, humans, in a transition and an opportunity of looking at our technologies, but we are also human, organic sovereigns. Sovereignty is the number one piece of this message, I believe. And for those of us who have grown up in the cities and in civilization as we know it, to regain our sovereignty is a huge piece and the most vital thing we can be asking ourselves right now. Our breath is sovereign. We wake up every day, and what a gift. So the Hopi Reservation, again, a very private place, and thousands of years before the Catholic Church came and decided to instill what they were bringing across the world to the Hopi people, they have a tradition that says that the Great Spirit, Christ, the Great White Brother, that refer to, but that he appeared to them on the mesa. That when he returned, the peace. Okay, so basically, I mean, we all need to eat, right? That's one of our number one needs in life. And the way they garden is to put multiple seeds into one hole. And the reason this is so valuable is because the way we do it here in the West, we separate corn. They grow corn, beans, squashes out there, namely. And we separate each seed about a foot apart in our fields, and that requires bees to cross-pollinate for the fruit to actually come up. Whereas the way they were whole, and it only requires the wind to cross-pollinate. So out on the Hopi Reservation, a couple years ago, our friend, the elder that we help, said that they hadn't seen bees in about 5 years. So while they are very much, it seems, behind, they're also far advanced. Because of the simplicity in the way that they live, they can see the impact of our civilization much more readily. So it's been fascinating. In the last 3 years we've been going, we did see a bee. Mm-hmm. We also saw a couple of the hopping mice, like the kangaroo mouse, that has also been nearing extinction. And we saw a little horned lizard, which is an ancient animal. So we've been really just It's been such an amazing experience to get to see a little bit of the fact that what is true, what is real, what needs to be maintained is still there. It is still here, right? So what do we need to do? Do we need to just keep sitting and watching on the TV what is happening around us? Or do we need to engage in sovereignty? And how do we do that? So that's been the number one purpose for my involvement out there, to challenge myself with those questions. There are many indigenous nations, but the Hopis are blood related to the Ojibways, and they have come from the ancient Far East. And so there's a lot of bits of history's puzzle pieces that are there within the Hopi people. Granted, there's also a lot of derision, and one of the pieces that we had in the discussion this morning was, okay, so if Christ appeared to them, how does that align with the fact that, they've been conquered and pillaged by the church as it has stood? And I love that question, because that is the question of sovereignty. Do we allow our thoughts and our values to be sovereign thoughts and true values of maintaining life, community, the honor of one another? That is our human challenge, I believe. And to be sovereign, to have sovereign belief, to know that your spirit and your personal relationship with the one who wakes you every morning is sovereignty. And as we open that conversation and the channel for that conversation to be louder and to be shared, instead of it being competitive or finger pointing, it's a longevity that we have as our opportunity as humanity. So it's just such a fascinating experience and a study and a challenge, and we just get faced with bridging our cultures when we go out there. We get faced with super roughing it, like you bring your water, you bring your compostable toilet, you bring your food, you bring your things to cook on, you come prepared. But the invitation is out, and back in the 70s, especially 60s, 70s, 80s, people were coming from all around the world to help support the indigenous peoples, because with the pipelines and the uranium mining and all of the things that they've been facing in their vast open land, they're challenged with it daily. So back in those days, about 40 years ago, people were flocking there to help support, to learn, to grow the food. And that hasn't happened in about 40 years. So the elder that we're helping says we're in that first wave of fulfilling something that they have had in their prophecies for a while. And they say that if the indigenous cultures can't unite enough to come together and strengthen up to preserve sovereignty, the responsibility is going to fall on Bahana, and that's what they call the white people. So we have a huge gift of opportunity to look past these issues of churches and people's explanation of what belief looks like, of who Christ is, of who God is, whatever name you need to apply to honor the fact that you didn't put yourself here. None of us put ourselves here. There's a mystery of us waking up every day. So if we just at least honor that question and the gift that it is a blessing to be able to witness these trees and everything that has been put here for us, that we might be able to reclaim, and maybe a first-time experience of what we have yet to experience as humanity, that unity, the honor, the strengthening one another, because as we are at our best strength, then we can be better collectively. So sovereignty is the goal, and the invitation is there for us to keep coming to the reservation, to keep growing, to keep learning. We're hoping that we can go for a harvest this year. This is the first year that the water was actually very present in the clay that is below the sand. So it was very wet, very receiving of the seeds, and we're hoping to be able to go back and support for harvest. But the invitation is for us to bring more people, more strength, and to just open ourselves to understand, because I don't know it all. I'm just happy to share with you where I'm at in the journey right now, but it's definitely a worthy one.
As far as sovereignty goes, too, and speaking how Cinco de Mayo ties into everything, the Hopi have been inhabiting, they have been living in northeastern Arizona for well over 900 years, continuously settling. They have found tree rings in original construction that date back to around 1153 AD, I believe. And that's in their construction, so they know that it's been a settlement for at least that long, maybe even longer. And when the Bahana came over and said, after the Guadalupe Hidalgo Treaty and the things that created the Mexican border, as that was coming into place, they just assumed that all those people came from Mexico, so it'd just be right if we give them the option to just go back below this line, back to where they came from, and Bahana will take care of it after that. And the fact of the matter being that the Hopi have been right there for so long that there was no way that they could accept that, and they had to hold on to their sovereignty. And they actually brought it up to the Fourth Russell Tribunal in Amsterdam, and where each one of the indigenous tribes got to bring one issue that they would have heard in front of the World Court. The Third Russell Tribunal was actually the Nuremberg trials, to give you some sort of perspective. And in doing so, the Hopi brought in the Guadalupe Hidalgo Treaty and their view of their right of sovereignty to the World Court, and that was the issue that they brought. That was just kind of a quick little history catch-up for everybody who may not be familiar, but our experiences going down, working in the gardens, working with one of the last elders with connections to the indigenous ways of gardening, really opened up for me the connection heartically, through the heart, that humanity is sovereign within ourselves. And that is the common drum that we all walk to, that rises us every morning. It is that heartbeat. And through that facet, through that perspective, if we can take our mind and turn it down a little bit, and turn our hearts up a little bit so we can hear that, we can see where we need to apply action to in our daily lives to make choices to affect change and instill these sovereign values for ourselves and for everyone else on this planet that we share it with.
So if you don't see yourself going all the way out to Arizona, that's all right. But if you do, please feel free to reach out to us, because it would be wonderful to have more of your presence out with us. But how can we be sovereign in our day-to-day practices? And what are the things that bring us closer to finding what is true? My number one thing, like if I could just really instill this and say it everywhere, it would be to garden and compost. Compost, compost, compost. Because we are nothing without the ground that's under our feet. We kind of need it.
And maybe unknowingly, we've been wastefully taking that thing that could be regenerative soil matter and putting into landfills where it becomes tainted, soiled, poisoned, and we're taking that energy out of its natural cycle and putting it in prison almost. And that because of our actions in doing that and not composting and trying to bring the soil back from food scraps and things like, obviously you need to bring in leaves for the carbon to make sure everything
Keep balance.
Yep, it keeps a balance, but instead of throwing it away, throw it outside in a pile, maybe where you put your, leaves, where you rake your leaves in the fall time. And then by the time spring comes around, after the snow melts, it's doing its thing, the microbes are getting all happy in there, and then you have soil and you can use it in your garden in the spring. It's such a simple solution, and I can't believe that I had to go all the way out in the desert to have that kind of epiphany revealed to me.
I love that. So one of the quotes that were read today in the readings was from Matthew and from the parable of the sower, because I love that parable being that we are the soil. We are the varying types of soil that are listed there. Either the seeds falling to rocks where we don't even let it set in, we don't even try to listen or try to tune in. And then there's the thorns where people are interested and they want to and they're excited, but there's struggle that comes when we do our personal work. And whether it's just setting up your garden, and at first, that first couple years, it's really tough. You find there are all of these rocks or a lot of roots or whatever it may be that puts that first trial in place to see if we really want it. Are we really willing? And if we do power through it, if we, even say, I don't really know what to do with this, can I please have some help? The help comes. And then we just have to follow through. And then as we're following through, we have some victories. And then we also have some harder tests and a little bit more of that pushback to see how much we really are willing to go for the gold. Everyone has the option to win in their life because we already have won. We have our lives.
The hardest thing for me to come to terms with, and I've been experiencing it personally, is focusing on those simple things that are true to our sustenance here on this earth, and trying to tune out all the other chatter, all the other distractions, all the other conveniences that are eating away my energy and time and keeping me in a state of inaction. I find myself like having the best ideas, but at the same time, all these other things start coming in. So I try to cut them out like a cancer, honestly. Because if those things are, even if I'm thinking about them, it's eating up seconds in my day that I could be out there in action. God gave me hands. God gave me legs. God gave me this breath and mobility. Or God, great spirit. Once again, whatever name is comfortable to you, we all experience it. But given that, action. Do something. If you have an idea, follow through with it. That's all it takes to bring change into the world, is to look at the simple things that are all uniformly needed by all of us, focusing on just those things and making little changes in those arenas in order to step into a brighter tomorrow.
I love that you just said that, because that brings me to one of the things I thought through in preparing. And so the good ground being receptive soil, healthy, brings forth the bounty and the fruit to consume and to re-nourish. So the cycle continues. In these past 3 years, where we've gone to Standing Rock and we, as a band, Mystic Dub, we held a show and had people just bring donations that were on a list that the people at Standing Rock had asked for. Winter was approaching, so they were trying to bulk up and get ready for the crazy cold they have in the Dakotas. So we held a show and we gathered all these donations, and we were just going to hand them to GVSU because they had a couple tours that were going out there, but they actually canceled their trip because the weather turned really bad. And we thought, oh man, well, we can't just sit here on these donations, so I guess we're going. So we went, and when we went to bring these donations, we went to the donations hut, and there were like 2 people on staff there at the time, and they were just like in a daze of overwhelmness because there were all these donations, 5,000 people spread throughout Standing Rock, and some people were in need, and they couldn't necessarily find the person in need to match the item they were in need of. So these volunteers who had, put all this effort in and done their best, but what I found was that we had put a lot of effort into a place that really, into a process that didn't really help. Okay, so we brought all of this stuff. Some of it we were able to get to where they needed it, but some of it was excess. And I just felt like, wow, I wanted to do something good, and I followed through, and we came all the way out here, and I don't even know what I'm in the middle of. I have no idea what I'm doing here.
What is the learning lesson from all of this? Yeah.
But at least by making that effort and going, I learned that. So I'm not just going to assume next time I hear about some fundraiser or whatever, I'm not just going to assume it's going to go exactly where it needs to go. I'm going to do research, or I'll go do it myself to make sure. And that's partly why in going out to Arizona, that's part of the deal, is unless we go do it ourselves, we really don't know. So good intention is great, but if we're going to be really effective and save ourselves, then there's some very vital information we need to know, and we need to clue into, and we need to be brave enough to admit that we don't know. And then we can be humble enough to say, please show me, please tell me, please guide me. And then we can have enough courage to follow through.
And I would like to probably wrap up by saying thank you for all of your contributable donations.
Yes,
we had just enough fuel to get back. So, everything was done just right, and we thank all of you for your time and your efforts and
Thank
for
you so much.
listening to us speak today. Grow a garden.
Blessings on the journey.
Bless it.